Hi there, I'm Chris Ost.
And I'm Aos, and this is the Aos-to-Aos podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're talking about, what's going on with the stock market right now. Everyone's kind of freaking out, so we wanted to kind of do a video talking about it. The stock market is affected right now mostly by, the new, I won't say it, but the virus, because I don't know if it will get demonetized, but the virus that's going around right now. And it's basically affected the supply chain coming from China is one of the main reasons why the stock market is taking a hit. Why don't you walk us through that and kind of explain it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much just supply chain. I mean, there's a lot of things that go
Right.
into it. I mean, anytime there's any kind of uncertainty, the stock market reacts to it. We've seen this in the past with different kinds of viruses and things like that. Wars, rumors of wars. There's a lot of things that are contributing to the stock market right now. I mean, when this whole pandemic started, it was also kind of coincidental with Russia and Iran, the Middle East, and OPEC, I should say, were trying to negotiate a deal on production numbers and things like that. So I mean, this kind of coincided with that, and with those two things happening at the same time, that brought oil prices down. That's a pretty big part of the market right now is oil prices. I mean, we're the largest oil producer in the United States, so obviously that affects the stock market. So there's a lot of things that contributed to it.
A lot of things that contribute to it. Starting from basically it was like just a pandemic then, but then it affects things like, products coming into the U.S., which a lot of our products do, oil, a lot of oil is coming from China, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then that affects profitability in companies because they're not able to sell as much. And then they're not able to sell as much, their profit goes down, and then people sell their stock, which makes it, the value of the company go down in the stock market and things like that. That's why you're seeing those crashes, things like that.
Well, to just correct something you say, or you said there, China is actually the largest importer of oil. So, I mean, obviously when our economy, when we're the largest exporter of oil and largest producer of oil, I guess we're not largest exporter, but largest producer of oil,
right.
That's obviously going to affect our economy, and that's going to affect all the economies of the world. Russia, the Middle East, all these big oil producing places, I mean, that's going to affect it. So, the other thing that's being affected in China right now is manufacturing.
Right.
With so many people sick over there, they're not able to make the goods to, stock the shelves in, the Western countries where, like, Walmart buys a lot of their stuff from China, things like that. They don't have the capacity to keep up with the demand over here. So, right. The cost of products is going to go up, obviously, which is almost counterproductive as well, because, I mean, as things are slowing down here and the cost of our products are going to go up, that's going to drive us into a bit of a financial downturn.
Right.
And all these companies out there see that. That's why the stock market reacts when stuff like this happens. You don't really think about why would a business's value go down just because there's sick people around the world. Well, I mean, obviously the trickle down effect from sick people not able to go into work, not being able to keep up with supply and demand, prices go up. It's a real snowball effect.
Right. Yeah. And we're seeing this all over the world too. It's not just, this virus is not just in China or in the US, it's now all over the world. So it's almost like, it seems like it's the end of the world, but it's probably going to come back pretty soon. Like, when we saw with SARS and things like that, you were talking about that earlier. Like, what should we expect for the next coming months and the year to come? Like, should we expect the market to go up?
I think so. I mean, I was doing some research earlier because, I was kind of curious. The stock market has traditionally grown 12% per year. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you look at that over, that's an average over 20 years kind of thing, it traditionally goes up about 12% per year. So that might mean 1 year is 25% and 1 year is, 15% and 7%. And, like the numbers, it doesn't have to be an exact 12%. We all understand averages. But, I kind of looked back because I was curious how it coincided to some of these things like SARS and swine flu and these different worldwide pandemics we've had, or epidemics or whatever you want to call them, and it always seems like within 6 to 12 months the market bounces back to at least the same spot, and in most cases actually bounce back to have a huge increase. Like with SARS, I think within 6 months it bounced back about 6 to 8%. I didn't really look at the numbers that close, but I do remember that within 12 months it was right up around 25%. There was a couple different ones I looked at. So I mean that's huge. I mean, for it to come back 25%, even at like right now we're at about an 8% loss in the market. Right. I mean, by the end of this year, if we came back to a 25% gain within 12 months, I mean that would be an 18% increase net, right? If it was, if we had, or no, sorry, 16%. But I mean that's above average. So. Right. But you put that into the pool of things, and I don't really. I think that basically the market drops. Once everything's fine, it's going to come back, and it's going to continue to grow as it historically has.
Right, and so a good advice for people would be just to stay in the market and ride it out, and just invest normally.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. See, my strategy right now is I'm actually investing more because the stock market's down, and I know that in the long term that money is going to come back, and I'm going to be in a better position. Mm-hmm. Not everyone is in that position where they can take some extra money and invest it, but for me, I'm in a position where I can do that, so I'm going to take advantage of it. So. Right.
Yeah. So if you're in a position where you're able to put a little bit more money, you encourage people to do that.
Absolutely, if you can afford it. I mean, I'm not saying going out and borrowing or taking it from obviously the stock market's risky.
Right.
I mean, I could be completely wrong. I'm not giving financial advice here because I'm not a financial advisor. Yeah. I'm saying what's right for me. So I guess I'm expressing right now what's right for me. Right. If people want to take that and do the same thing, I mean, as long as they understand that there is risk involved, for me, I'm willing to take that risk, and I think that in the end it's going to pay off.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So if you take anything from this podcast, it's basically when people are going one way, go the other way, but do your research, of course. Mm-hmm. That's what Warren Buffett said. When people are fleeing, I believe he said walk towards the panic or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he's made a lot of money in recessions. And if you look at billionaires, Donald Trump, Warren Buffett, all these millionaires and billionaires made a lot of money in times of panic because they didn't panic and they just kept doing what they do normally, mm-hmm. and it ended up paying off for them. And you should probably look at that and say, and act accordingly mm-hmm. to those, to what you find. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I mean, I am investing money into the stock market too. I've been buying Walmart stock. I recently just started buying Amazon, Coca-Cola, things like that. Things that are safer. What are some stocks? I know you're buying some Bitcoin, you're buying oil stocks, correct? Mm-hmm. And did you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Sure. Right now, I mean, I'm in the oil and gas industry, so I mean, it's an industry I know about, and I've kind of, since I'm in the industry, I've been following a few stocks and paying attention to it. So, some of the people that we work for, and plus the company that I work for, so I kind of know where the stock should be, what its value should be, what the forecast is looking for, because it's something that's right in front of my eyes all the time. So, I'm investing into a few small oil producers, mm-hmm. Some small service companies, a couple larger service companies as well. But I won't go into specifics because I don't really want to, like I say, I don't want to give investment advice to anyone.
Right.
Bitcoin, you did mention, haven't invested any money back into it. I have invested money into it in the past. I actually sold the last of my Bitcoin off less than a week ago when it was still at a high price, which seemed like a pretty good decision on my part. And I'm waiting for it to get down to, its bottom resistance line right now. Right. What I mean by resistance is where it's going to bounce back and either stay there or start coming back up. So, it's something that I do watch, but it has to be at the right price for me to buy into it. I think there's a lot of money, but the cryptocurrency market is so volatile that I definitely wouldn't recommend anyone just to throw their money into it.
Especially if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. I mean, I've been into cryptocurrency for probably 2 years now, 2 to 3 years. And, I know what to watch for. I know, what the history of it has been. If you take the time and do the research, it can be a great investment, or else it can be a horrible investment. A lot of people lost a lot of money because a few years ago when Bitcoin went up to $20,000, it went skyrocketed right up to $20,000, and everyone started panic buying, and they bought Bitcoin at $19,000. Then all of a sudden it just suddenly crashed. I mean, as quick as it went up, it came back down, and it came down into the $1,000 to $2,000 range. A lot of people lost all their money. They all of a sudden had 10% of their money left, so they sell it off and they count that as an $18,000 loss. Well, if those people would have held it until last week, it was at $9,200. So they would have got part of their money back.
Right.
And I mean, eventually, I don't know how long it's going to be until we get back up to that $20,000 price point. It may never get there, but cryptocurrency is actually getting to the point now where it's more mainstream. You have a lot of institutional investors, banks, JP Morgan, big guys like that are actually taking Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies more seriously. So right. I think there's some stability coming. They're actually working on getting exchanges certified for it so that you can actually exchange it, with a federally regulated exchange.
Right.
And that's eventually going to come. So that's why I feel like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are actually a good investment as long as you do your research and understand what you're getting yourself into.
Just like any other stock, though.
It is, but
it is more volatile.
It is way more volatile. I mean, if you look at a chart for a Bitcoin, you're going to see larger peaks and larger drops, and like even during a day, I mean, it's going to be all over the place. Where you might see a stock like Amazon. And I mean, I'm not sure what Amazon stock is at right now, but you're probably only going to see, like less than 1% of change or a couple percent of change, in a day, as things are trading and stuff like that. And over a year, you're going to just see a gradual increasing trend line. So
right. I wanted to quickly go back to what you were saying about the oil stocks. Oil right now, since it's way down, if you know about the oil industry and you know what you're doing and you know what stock to buy, it'd be a good one to get into because eventually it is going to go back up, of course. Mm-hmm. Do you want to, I mean, you mentioned that a little bit, but do you have anything else to add about that? What, like, not necessarily the companies, but, the fact that the oil industry it's going to go back up because we have, we're so dependent on oil. The price is going to go back up once all this is over. And so it's one of those more safe bets. You know what I'm saying? Like, aside from, like, things that are volatile, like cryptocurrency, you have your average, run-of-the-mill stocks that everyone invests in. And then right now, oil is probably going to be one of those ones that you want to invest in if you want to make a good gain or...
Again, it's just so hard to predict. Oil obviously is something that we're always going to need. I mean, we always need gasoline. We always need, furnace oil, oil and gas. I mean, we're always going to need gas to heat our homes or something or to produce electricity. So it's always going to be something that we're going to need. Planes all fly on it. Right. Trains run on diesel. We can't get away from it unless we go to all, natural power. But I mean, for that to happen, it's, way out of our lifetimes. Right. So in that sense, I mean, it's a good investment because it's always going to be needed. But I mean, just like any kind of investment, you're investing in a company. You're not investing in the actual oil in the ground. You're investing in a company, and that company can be run by really good business people, or it can be run by really bad business people.
Research.
Yeah, you have to do your research. So you still have to be really careful with it. It's still a good investment if you can invest with a good company. And, we've talked about this on previous podcasts about knowing who's running the company.
Right.
You did some angel investing and you did the research and you figured out, I like where this CEO has been and what her plans are and her vision and what she's accomplished in the past. Okay, I can invest in that. And that's what people need to do. They need to go out and they need to do the research and make sure they're investing into a company that's stable. I guess a startup company, it wouldn't be that bad either, but it just depends on who's running it and what kind of market share they have and what kind of forecast they have for where they're going to make their money, where they're going to spend their money, all those kind of things. So you just need to do your research.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if the past has been any indicator, it used to be like Enron was such a good company, but. If anybody talks about Enron today, it's not in a good sense. It's not like, oh, they're the next Enron. If they say they're the next Enron, that's not a good thing. You know what I'm saying? So, because it wasn't run by good people, it didn't have a good culture, and it's definitely hard to say that people could have done more research and avoided it, but the truth is that they fooled everybody basically, and but there is a little bit of clues and things like that if you look at the numbers, the people that are running it, what they've been doing, who they associate with. You might be able to have some indicators, and even if you're wrong, take the safe road, because you don't know, that could be your whole life savings, you know what I mean, like Enron. So be smart and just go business as usual from this point on, even though we're in a downturn, is basically what we've been saying this whole podcast, and what I'm trying to reiterate to the people that are listening right now.
So. And that's the thing too. I mean, you don't have to invest in oil and gas. I mean, like we talked earlier, because of China being going through this pandemic right now, their manufacturing is coming down, right? So, I mean, all of a sudden, we're going to have a harder time getting products and things into the U.S. I mean, I'm sure it's going to affect car manufacturing, all that kind of stuff. So you're going to probably see, like even stocks like Toyota start to come down a little bit. Probably Amazon a little bit too, because, I mean, they're a big retailer. So, I mean, they're going to depend a little bit on supply from China as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you were saying that you just invested some in Amazon.
Yeah, and well, they actually, I think their stock was up about 2,000 or 3,000, and yesterday I checked, it was about 1,500. So they lost quite a bit of money in this, because a lot of their stuff is from China. They're more like an e-commerce business mostly. So a lot of their stuff does come from China or from like independent manufacturers in the U.S. So and a lot of those manufacturers get their stuff from China. So it's like they're pretty dependent on on China and the manufacturing in China. So they do have a pretty big downturn, like I said, because of this, but it should go back up, like we've been talking about. Like Amazon's a company that's run by very smart people. It should go back up if you do your research and you look into it. I believe that's going to go way back up. Same thing with like Walmart. I believe it's going to go back up too. Walmart's down. I think it was 103 yesterday, and their high was a couple. I think it was like a week ago. It was 120. So they're down a little bit too. Not as bad as Amazon, because not all their stuff. I don't believe all their stuff comes from China. Like I know a little bit about Walmart, and I think all the meat comes from Nebraska. We get a lot of the stuff from around the U.S. and things like that. So it's not as bad as of right now as Amazon, but as we said, like it's a whole system where this will affect this and this will affect that. So we might see a little bit more downturn with Walmart, but I think it'll go back up eventually. So yeah, absolutely. Which I do own stock in too, Walmart. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that I mean, if a person does their research, it's actually a really good time to take advantage of the stock market, and maybe increase your holdings a little bit, depending on what you're out for. For me, I'd like to just increase my holdings a little bit. I'm not out to make a quick buck.
Right.
It's one of the things that we talk about quite a bit, is the long game, for the future. The thing is, if I can get twice as much stock, or 3 times as much stock in the company right now, when I know it's going to be worth more in the long run, I mean, it's just, for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the last recession, the only two, like you mentioned, car companies, the only 2 car companies that actually didn't file for bankruptcy that are based in the U.S. was Ford and Tesla. Those are 2 companies that have been basically known for being good-run companies. You know what I'm saying? So that's no surprise to me. But other people who invested in other companies might have lost a lot more money if they invested in, I don't know, Nissan, Chevrolet, you know what I mean? So do your research, look for these companies, and don't put all your life savings into it. Because if you put all your life savings into, Chevy, you might have lost a lot more than if you put it into Tesla, something like that. So be smart, do your research. And I think that's probably my parting view, is just do your research, business as usual, and you should be fine. Don't freak out. Just basically with everything going on with this virus, is everyone's getting so freaked out, and they're selling their stock. They're going to the store and buying all the toilet paper that's there. And if they just went business as usual, they would be better off in the long term, instead of losing money possibly, and just making things worse in the short term. So, but that's just basically my parting views.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to wrap things up, my final thought would be, like just what you said, don't invest anything into the stock market that you can't afford to lose.
Right.
Right now it's so volatile. I mean, I guess we don't really know what's going to happen with this. I think that we're probably going to see it come to an end here pretty soon, and that, we'll get back to life as normal. But, you never know. I mean, we live in a world that, you just never know what's going to happen next. I guess that's one of the most exciting things about our world, but one of the most scary things about it. So, yeah, just be careful with where you're investing your money, and only invest what you can afford to lose.
Yeah. One thing, too, I wanted to mention, I just kind of thought about this, is don't be afraid to get into the stock market as well. Because if you put $100 into the stock market, and even if you lose it, is that the end of the world? You know what I mean? You could probably make that back in a little bit. Mm-hmm. So don't put thousands of dollars. If you're about to retire, don't put your whole life savings, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars into the stock market, unless you're willing to lose that. But a couple $100, and you could be, you could buy shares, and then those shares maybe in a few years could go up to a couple thousand maybe. Mm-hmm. If you lose that couple $100, is that big of a deal? You could make that back. You know what I mean? So don't worry about it. Look at it that way. I think what was interesting was Graham Stephan talked about it, where he was like, if the price of eggs goes down, you're not like, oh, I should have bought it, this week. I lost so much money because I bought it last week. You know what I'm saying? Just don't worry about that. Just buy as usual, and just invest what you're willing to lose.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I know this is a short video, but we just kind of wanted to, address current events and kind of talk a little bit about what we saw was happening in the world right now. Tune in on Monday and you'll see our regular podcast. And I hope you guys enjoyed the subject today. And
yeah. All right. Well, why don't you guys leave a comment down below if you want us to talk about anything. We missed a couple weeks there. I think it shows. We kind of stuttered over our words. We weren't in the groove, but we'll try to do better about making sure that we're on track. We had some scheduling issues, but why don't you guys leave a comment down below about anything you want us to talk about, something about current events that are going on maybe, and then we can talk about that. Go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, and make sure to hit that bell notification. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Yeah.